Hi, I'm Sharlie Harby, and we're here tonight doing the Fat and Cholesterol Myths lecture, which is new. You're joining us online. We will post the lecture notes so that you'll have those, and we have a couple handouts as well. Okay, so how many of you were taught that fat is the enemy? Anyone? Yes, like we were taught that fat was bad, and if you eat fat, you're going to be fat, right? We literally thought if you put fat in your mouth, then it's like going, like a sink drain going into your arteries and everything and just clogging it all up, which is just simplistic thinking, but that's why it made sense to us when we were lied to about fat, right? Because you're like, okay, if I eat the fat, then I'll be fat, right? It seems simple enough, but fat is actually just another macronutrient along with proteins and carbohydrates, the other nutrients that we have. It is a very sustainable source of energy. It's a clean burning fuel, so the body doesn't have to do 20 extra steps with it to use it and utilize it for energy. The mitochondria in cells love fat. Every cell in your body has a lipid wall around the outside. So we have, there's fat tissue in our brain. It's a huge part of our makeup, okay? And then it's actually the preferred source for energy for the brain. Now the brain will, if it has glucose and ketones or glycogen and ketones to choose from, it will pick the sugar as the fuel, but because it's easier and it breaks down faster, right? But it actually prefers fat as fuel, and it's longer sustaining and cleaner burning. So what are ketones? Ketone bodies, all of you I'm sure have heard the ketogenic diet or keto this, keto that. It's the diet of our generation right now, and it's being really studied for cellular health support in the body, brain health, all of those different things. And so I'm excited to see where that goes. There's a lot of studies being launched for brain health. And so I think it's extremely important. We have a lot of mental health disease in our country, and it's skyrocketing. So I do think it is extremely important. So ketones are also known as ketone bodies. They're byproducts of the body. When the body starts breaking down fat for energy, then the liver kicks out ketones, and the body can use those as the fuel in the body. Now when you eat sugar, then you have a whole cycle which will go insulin resistant. At this point they become hardened, and then if the body doesn't use the full fuel, it goes through the liver and it kicks out glucose, glycogen, so then it gets stored in our fat cells. So how many of you think you're using all the fuel that you eat daily? Anyone?
Well, I don't think I'm using all my fuel, but I'm definitely trying to gain some weight here, and it's like I eat a lot.
Yeah.
Or maybe not a lot at once, maybe just a little bit.
Little bits here and there.
Yeah.
And that's a point that I was about to make, is that we used to eat in like a feast or famine mode, and so our bodies were very able to go into ketosis, use the fat as fuel and energy, and then also know when it needed to store glucose and fat to prepare, for not eating, because we've gotten to a place where we eat constantly, and so our bodies don't really know how to go from one or the other and store properly and burn energy properly because we eat constantly. And your case might be different, and that's something that we can work on with your body.
Yeah, right now I'm doing kind of good, like keeping up my weight so it doesn't go down. It's not going down anymore, but
yeah,
maybe I shouldn't eat all the time, right?
Increase your good fats. We'll talk about it too. Yeah, we'll talk about it for sure. And your next time, remind me of your appointment, okay?
Okay.
Ketosis is do you have a question? Okay. What is ketosis? So ketosis is the result of following the ketogenic diet, but it's also sometimes called the ketosis diet. And that's what I said. When you reduce carbohydrate intake in your body, then your body then starts to go to the preferred fuel of ketones. And so you have to give it a chance to do that. If you give it carbohydrates to run on, then it's going to choose that because it's easier, quick. When you eat carbohydrates, you feel great, and then you crash, right? And so your body would choose the fat as fuel if you give it a chance to, but that means you have to reduce the carbs in your diet. And so that would be grains, sources of sugar, fruit. Those are drastically reduced when you're doing a ketogenic diet, okay?
You not eat food at all.
You keep if you're trying to stay like under 25 grams of carbs, most likely you won't use it on fruit because it would use a lot of it, even like the raspberries and things like that. Would you agree? Yeah, like you're like, I want something more filling than a raspberry. So
I'm a blueberry eater.
You're a blueberry girl?
Yeah. Yes, I'm a berry.
Yeah. And so like you kind of have in like strict low carb, like ketogenic might not be for everybody's body, and that's why, you know, Dr. Christie will work with you. But you might be able to do berries and then remain low carb on the other stuff. Do you know what I'm saying? You have to kind of find your carb load that works for your body. So, our bodies are cars, I like to say, and so if you have to choose what kind of fuel you're going to put into it. Do you want to give it the clean burning, the one that's longer sustaining? I'm only on a ketogenic diet if I was going to talk about it. So I've always been extremely low carb after being a patient for a long time. Like, I don't really eat much fruit and stuff because it's so sweet to me now. Like, the more you reduce it, the more you don't want it. But only on day 2. Yesterday I was hungry, but the longer you're on it, the less you even feel like you need to eat all the time. And so I'm experiencing that. So I would rather, honestly, sometimes I'm annoyed with how much we have to eat. Me and my mom were talking about it yesterday. We're like, how much do we have to eat all the time? You know, it's very time consuming. So, you know, I want to give my body the fuel that's going to burn longer, last longer, be better for my energy and all of those things. So you get to choose the fuel that you put in. So I had so much fun preparing for this lecture because there is so much drama behind why we don't eat fat and why we think butter's bad and we think that fat is bad for the body. There's a man named Ansel Keys. If you do any research at all, you'll see his name everywhere. He was a very vivacious man and was very convincing in the way that he talked. He was not actually a nutritionist or a medical doctor. However, he changed the way our country and our world sees fat. So how it went down is that he was friends with the cardiologist of Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, and you know, he had a heart attack. And so he got in with this cardiologist. It was a time for him to influence and started doing studies like why was heart disease on the rise in our country at the time. And so he convinced Eisenhower's cardiologist that fats were bad. And so because Eisenhower loved sausage and butter and things like that. However, he also smoked horribly and drank a ton, all these other things that were like, you know, left to the side. And so that influence started, and then he got on with the American Heart Association because they were really pushing trans fats, margarines, and those kinds of foods because they're longer shelf life, more addictive, all those things that the food industry wants. And their biggest donors were the margarine manufacturers that was coming out around that time. And so he was on commercials and everything for the American Heart Association saying that saturated fat was bad. He had a study of 21 countries. He left all but 7 of them out and just picked the ones that fit his data and threw away the rest. And then he also would say saturated fats were bad, but in his studies he was actually using trans fats and margarines. So he wasn't even using in his study what he was saying was bad. So fat got a really bad rap really quickly, and he was extremely influential. People said, like, if he said it, you believed him because of just how he was. And so he actually was the creator of the World War II K ration, which he named after himself, the Keys ration, which included cigarettes and addicted millions, but he's all about heart health. And then I told you about the study. He used the trans fat rich margarines in his experiments, but implied that he used butter, which was not true. The lead investigator on a coronary experiment, but he didn't publish any of the negative data. And then he was the architect of what we call our food pyramid, and it's all what's the biggest part on the bottom? Grains and carbohydrates. And then the saturated fats are super tiny at the top, right? A small part of the diet.
Yeah, even in school they were teaching us that like saturated fat was bad, like in our books, and there's like explaining why, like the double buns and all of this is harder to break down.
Yep. Yeah, it's fascinating. If you guys are as curious as I was. It looks like it's really hard to read. This is called Deep Nutrition, and I'll list it at the end, but Dr. Catherine Shanahan, it's fascinating, and she goes through all the history even of how margarine was discovered, which margarine and trans fats are the equivalent to what is used in plastics, like chemically, to make the plastics flexibly hard. But then we eat the crispy foods like French fries and donuts and all those things because it has those same properties. It's like just short of being plastic. But her book is fascinating, super easy to read, but she goes more into how it all transpired and how we've all, I mean, how many of you picked up a bag of Swedish fish at some point in your life and said, well, it's fat-free, so it can't be bad, right? Like, oh, I can eat the whole bag because it's fat-free. Honest, I had that thought, because that's how, in high school, I remember thinking, well, it's a fat-free candy. That's crazy. It's all sugar, right?
Oh, those energy drinks, the Bang energy drinks, I see a whole bunch of my friends drinking that, and they're like, it's 0 calories.
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't look good. It looks awful.
Like, 0 calories, a tank full of chemicals. Perfect. So fat doesn't make you fat, sugar does. Excess carbohydrates, which is a quick energy source, then gets stored as fat in the body. So we've talked about that. And then it puts us in this vicious cycle of eating carbs, storing fat, eating more carbs, storing fat, because carbs do not sustain you or fulfill you. You all experience those highs and lows, right? The afternoon crash, it's not a sustaining fuel source. So I've listed here the results of what happened for us by Ansel Keys promoting what he did and lying to all of us. Butter consumption dropped from 18 pounds per person per year to 4. Vegetable oil consumption is up 5-fold from 11 pounds per person to 59 pounds per person a year. And we'll talk about, you have a chart in your folder that lists the oils to stay away from, and I'll break down why. And then there's the good fats that you can consume that don't affect the body in the same way. So I'll explain that in a little bit. In 1900, the heart disease was really rare, and now it's the #1 cause of death in both men and women. Sugar consumption prior to 1900 was anywhere from 18 it was 18 pounds per person per year, and then 1900 it was 80 pounds per person per year, and now we're up to over 180 pounds of sugar per person per year. And that comes also through like corn syrups and rice syrups and all that stuff as well too. 2/3 of our country is now obese, and that was not true prior to Eisenhower and Keys in that whole era. Okay, we became the fat-free nation. There's fat-free products everywhere on the shelves. Cookies on the shelf that said they're fat-free. Great. So products came. They had to replace in the fat. If you take out all the fat out of food, it doesn't taste good. So they had to pound the sugar in there and put the fake fats in there, right? They want to increase the taste and lengthen shelf life. And so soon after, if you look at any of the studies and any of the charts, obesity, heart disease, diabetes, all of that is just, cancer is through the roof, right? With the onslaught of the fat-free country, we were taught that animal fats contain cholesterol. It's a natural appetite suppressant. So when you eat fat, what I was talking about with you earlier, it actually suppresses your appetite because the leptin and the other hormones that tell you when you're hungry or full can actually be processed like they should be processed, and then you're sustained longer. And like I said, I'm starting to feel like I don't need to. I was really worried that I wasn't going to have dinner tonight, and I actually feel great. So here's the upswing of keto, that I'll be sustained longer. And then the polyunsaturated fats, which we'll talk about how they're made, they actually impair your vitamin absorption and suppress your appetite so that you eat more and more and get less nutrition. Okay, they know that about the food that they're feeding us, but it makes a lot of money and we keep buying it and we're addicted to it. All right, so why is fat important? Do you guys think that fat is important to the body? Does anyone know what it's used for? Energy? You're doing something? Brain health, yep. Anyone else? It's a huge transporter for hormones in the body, like being able to get the hormones where they need to go, because hormones are fat soluble. They will, if you reduce cholesterol cholesterol in your body, your hormone production gets really messed up and out of balance. It affects mental health and mood because of how the brain will utilize fats to actually repair and sustain the brain and nourish the brain. Cognitive function, a lot of times you'll hear people who are on a ketogenic diet have very strong mental clarity, drive, energy. It clears the brain of all the extra sugar and the carbohydrates and things that fog the brain, and yeast overgrowth, etc. You'll have increased lean body mass. It decreases your insulin sensitivity. So, and it also will reduce inflammation in the body. You can read this whole list. There's a million reasons why we need cholesterol and fat in the body. And a lot of our minerals and proteins won't absorb like we need to and be able to utilize them if we don't have the fat there. So what do you think is happening with all of the statins that people are being put on? What does the statin do?
Take it hard. I've tried desperately to get my sister to quit, but
Yeah, they get put on it for high cholesterol is what they get put on it for, to reduce the blood cholesterol. And actually, their studies are showing that the blood cholesterol levels are not linked to the heart disease at all. And also, it's causing, because of all the things we talked about the body uses cholesterol for, if you take it out of the blood, then you have memory loss, hormone deficiency, muscle spasms. Like the reason the muscles are spasming is because you're getting liver toxicity from taking the statin. And then it reduces a necessary piece. I told you, every single cell in your body has cholesterol around the outside. So if you're taking a medication or reducing your intake of it, you're not giving every cell what it needs to function and be built. So they're seeing it affect everybody's body differently because there's cholesterol in every different part of our body and every function. So it's not like if you take a statin, every single person is going to have these things. Like some people are having neurological issues, some are having all these, hormonal issues. So it's affecting people differently. In modern medicine is starting to retract on statins. And with statins, the surgeons that I've seen in different textbooks and different things being quoted, the people that are on their table getting heart surgery, their blood cholesterol level is not above 200, it's 180 and below. So it's not the blood cholesterol level that is causing them to be on the table for heart surgery. So, but where before they were saying if you're over 200, like you have to take a statin, it's going to kill you. So they're starting to retract on that and find that that is not actually correlated and not actually true. So if you look at your list, it's listed out in your paper, but if you have the chart that I gave you, you'll see a list of good fats and bad fats. And I really want to talk about polyunsaturated fatty acids before we look at the chart. So we'll go to the facts and cholesterol myths page. So keep the chart nearby. We'll start at the top and then we'll get to my new favorite subject. Let's see if you guys learned anything. Eating fat makes you fat. What actually makes us fat? Sugar. They're finding that sugar is what is increasing cholesterol in the blood, not actually the cholesterol that you're eating. It's the sugar. Glucose rises, your dopamine is released, insulin spikes to regulate blood sugar. Insulin triggers the body to store fat in what has not been used as fuel. So that's the facts. Myth, eating fat raises your cholesterol and causes heart disease. And that is not true. Polyunsaturated fats and sugar do, and I'll explain in a little bit how they work together as a team to cause this major problem. Scientific evidence clearly shows that dietary intake of saturated fat compared to serum blood levels of saturated fat show little, if any, correlation. They go on to say that some research is showing dietary carbohydrates are linked with higher levels of saturated fat in the blood. So thankfully they're becoming more enlightened now that the whole country is on a high carb diet and on statins, that maybe we should go back to how we used to eat, right? Low fat foods are a healthier option. Fact, when fat was removed from natural foods, sugar and fake fats were put in place. So these are things for you guys to remember. And then myth, canola and vegetable oils are heart healthy. How many of you were taught to use canola or vegetable oil? Don't know, but yeah, you were, right? I remember being taught that canola oil was like really good for omega intake and all this stuff. Well, now the truth is coming out about it. It's a polyunsaturated fat, and they're extremely delicate. So poly means that there's several oxygen molecules on there on the fatty acid chain, and so they're extremely sensitive to oxidizing. So if they get heated at all, they literally go poof, right? That's what poof is. I put the acronym in there for you. They go poof because when they're exposed and they get oxidized, they turn into what she calls in here ghouls, or what are these? Oh, zombies. They go in your blood and then cause more free radical damage and oxidative reactions in your body. And on the back, I have a picture for you. This is burned. I'm a very visual person, so this is burned in my mind forever. You'll see here, this is an artery, and it shows the unhealthy fat deposited on this artery wall here. Here is where it's ruptured and opened. It's been exposed to polyunsaturated fats over and over and over again, which you see a lot in processed food, but where America is getting it mostly is fried food, like French fries, chips, all the fried, even crackers are often fried in oils that literally go in and make your veins go poof. Okay? So the PUFAs poof and blow up your veins, okay? And then the body's natural response is to send cholesterol in the blood to patch and heal over those spots. Well, that's when you start having the calcium deposits and the plaque and the bad fats collecting there. They're trying to cover up the spot, right? And then sugar, I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll get to how sugar interacts with that in a second. So then you have these fats that are zombie fats. Zombie fats are mega trans fats. Has anyone heard mega trans fat yet? So trans fats are the man-made, partially hydrogenated oils and fats that have been added to all of our food that our body cannot digest, and they do exactly what I just told you. Literally cause inflammation and deteriorate our arteries, right? And then the mega trans fats are those fried oils I was talking about. So a restaurant, I think the law is 1 week that they're allowed to reuse the frying oil. But in fact, they're using it for 2 weeks. And this one man was touting that he just got this new oil that they've manufactured that he can use for 4 weeks. Well, when you use the same oil and heat it over and over and over again, that oxidative reaction happens. And then it's literally, they've created special cleaners that clean it off the wall. And that's what it's doing in our bodies. It's like they're having to create chemicals to remove it. And our bodies cannot digest it. And those are mega trans fats that cause even more damage to the arteries and to the veins, okay? So picture little zombies going around and causing trouble. So they blast your tissues with free radicals and make your arteries crispy, just like your chips and your French fries and your donuts. Okay?
Like some old people, like their body is like, when you touch them, it's like crunchy. Does that happen?
Say it again.
Like Jeffrey's dad, like his body, his chest and his back, like I was like massaging, and it was literally like crunchy. It was weird. Like
It could have been like deficient in something too, so I'm not exactly sure. You know, like omegas or something.
Yeah, it was weird.
Yeah, dehydrated. Yeah, could have been so
A
many.
whole bunch of things. Air too in his lungs.
Yeah, could have been a lot of reasons. So think about that when you're eating a crispy chip or donut or French fry. You don't want crispy arteries. Myth: the fat on our bodies comes primarily from our diet. Fact: most of the cholesterol in the body doesn't come from what you put in your mouth. It's actually what your body manufactures. So you don't want to give it what it uses to manufacture or the need for building extra cholesterol in the body. Myth: it's healthier to have cholesterol below 200. We already talked about that. All saturated fat is bad, and then the fact is that they're not actually all equal. There's long-chain triglycerides, medium-chain triglycerides, and short-chain triglycerides, and they're all digested and handled by the body completely differently. Medium and short are close to each other in how the body processes them. But the medium and short don't actually get stored as fat. They're solely fuel for the body. So that's why you'll hear people using MCT oil in their bulletproof coffee or whatever, because the body actually only uses it as fuel, and also it sustains you and decreases your appetite and all that stuff. So on the bottom you'll see that I noted what we just talked about the cholesterol. The root cause of the problem in heart disease and in the valves is the inflammation that we're causing from the bad fats that we are eating, and then the body's producing the cholesterol to go fix the problem. So the cholesterol isn't the root problem. It's being sent there to fix the problem we create with the bad fats that we eat and sugar. So where does sugar come into play? I do have a couple mails, so I have some get the mail attention data here for you. The zombie fats break down the tissue of the arteries, and then sugar gums them up, like goes on top of the bad deposits that you see there in the picture. Further, the same happens on the surface of lipoproteins. So lipoproteins transport fat in the body. That's their job. They like a candy shell, an M&M. They go around the fat, and they're like an address label for the fat, and they're supposed to tell the fat where it's supposed to go and what it's supposed to be used for. Well, sugar literally corrodes the outside of that, and then the sugar will rust. They say basically rust those labels, so the fats don't even know where they should go, and they become nomads, and they land in the arteries and clog up the arteries. So the sugar is the one that's distracting the body and keeping it from being able to send the good fats where they need to go. Okay, good and bad. So do I have your attention on fat and sugar and bad fats? Alzheimer's is being named insulin and sugar are having on the brain, and they're connecting the two together. Okay, so that's becoming the next big disease is Alzheimer's and memory disorders, which are coming from high sugar, high insulin in the body. And the second part is erectile dysfunction is on the rise, and it's due to the megatrans, those ghouls we talked about, and the zombie fats going in, and they actually block nitric oxide in the body, which is what expands the blood vessels. And also, the good fats are used for processing testosterone. So if they can't process testosterone, we have a major problem, right? So I figured most men think they're always fine, so I thought I could get their attention with that. Like, I'm fine. I'll eat my french fries forever. Well, you could end up with ED. So understanding blood work, I think blood work gets really confusing. And then your doctor, honestly, I'll see one patient walk in with one blood work, and their doctor is freaking out. And then the next patient can walk in with almost identical paper, like blood work results, and they're like, my doctor said it looks great, and I'm doing good. And I'm like, awesome. People are so confused because even their medical doctors give two totally different readings of the same numbers. One of them would see the papers and be like, you need to be on a statin, and the next one is like, you're doing great, So it gets really confusing, but you don't need to freak out if your total cholesterol is around 200. Like I shared with you earlier, the people who are being cut open on the table are below 180. Okay, so it's not the blood cholesterol. And when you have it too low, it leads to infertility, and it does lead to hormone imbalance. Triglycerides are raised by eating carbohydrates. That is the one that we look at. Like when you come in, and a lot of people will be like, I'm on a ketogenic diet, and then we see their blood work and their triglycerides are through the roof. We're like, no, you're not, because carbs are where the triglycerides come from. So you might be eating a lot of fat and a lot of bread together. Okay. So the carbohydrates raise your triglycerides. It should be half or less than the total cholesterol number. So we always look at your cholesterol total, and then we want it to be half of that when we look at your triglycerides. HDL, you can always remember, those are touted as the healthy fats or the healthy cholesterol. It's HDL, so the good ones. They're raised by eating the healthy fats. So on your chart, I gave you a list where you have the green ones you're allowed to eat, the good healthy fats that the body uses as fuel and likes, and they're more stable. When you move to the right, to the red zone, those are the ones that are unstable, the polyunsaturated ones that do get oxidized really easily if even they're exposed to a little bit of heat. And a lot of those oils are exposed to heat in manufacturing and processing of food, and that's when they become so detrimental and damaging to the body. So that's a really good chart. It's one of the best I've seen. So it really is helpful to see, like, here's what is safe, and I need to stay away from these. If you look at processed food, it's covered in the ones that are on the right, okay? So I gave you another chart because charts are helpful. On the very back, it said foods that are laden or loaded with pro-inflammatory fat, and so it gives you a good list to go through. One of them is salad dressings. You want to stay away from store-made. Salad dressing is so easy to make, and honestly, if you make it at home, then you taste store-bought dressing, you're like, after a while, you're like, well, it tastes like preservatives. Like, it doesn't even taste good. So it has the different things that you want to stay away from that are the main culprits. Like, who would think that rice milk has polysaturated fats in it? They put vegetable oil in rice milk as like an emulsifier, a thickener. Like, so things you don't even think about. So just go through that list and just be aware where they're sneaking in oils that you just wouldn't think it would be in there.
Does the rice milk do they list that for vegetable oil, or is it not always listed?
There's so many things they don't have to list. So one thing, like now citric acid is being made from corn and being wrapped in like, GMO whatever. Like, it's not even, but they just write citric acid. Like, so they can just write rice milk. They don't have to tell you how they got there. Do you know what I'm saying? So, right, yes.
I drank rice milk years
in
ago.
a grocery bill is a lot cheaper if you just buy in the produce section.
Yep, it's true. Stay on the outside of the grocery store.
Yeah.
LDL, there's a typo in my LDL line, but bad cholesterol rate is raised by eating unhealthy fats. It should be less than 3 times your HDL. So it shouldn't say LDL, but HDL. So you want it to be 3 times less. The ratio of HDL to LDL is more important than total cholesterol alone, but most doctors see the total, and that's what they freak out about. Like, oh, you're at 200? Like, you're going to keel over, which is not true. New blood panel tests are showing the ratios of omega-6 and 9. They're harder tests to get, but that's also really important. We listed some of the supplements you can use, but if you are seeing us as a patient, that would be something that we would test to figure out exactly what your body needed. It might not be the same as your neighbor and what their body would need. And I also listed on the back all the resources and things that I use to research for tonight. There's a lot of information and it's really fascinating, but I tried to condense it as best as I could and organize the information. But this was my favorite, and it's super easy to read as well. She has YouTube videos that you can watch that are really helpful. She has a website. And then there were 2 YouTube videos I watched that were so good, and I just pressed play while I'm driving. And you can just pull up YouTube, search the video, and listen to it while you drive. The Skinny on Fat, and then also Dietary Sense and Nonsense in the War on Saturated Fats. Those are really, really good, and taught by people who are studying this exact thing. Shanahan is a cardiologist, and she was doing what she was taught in school, and then realized that it was not her data from her patients doesn't line up with what she was taught. So I would look into those resources if you guys have more questions. Does anyone have any questions for me? And I'm going to explain how we do what we do here. Most of you are patients. Is anyone not a patient?
All patients.
All patients. A lot of patients have said it's so helpful to learn this part and learn how the muscle testing works. It helps them understand their care better as well. But a lot of you come into our office because you've been told either you're crazy for your symptoms because you're fine and nothing's wrong, or you do have symptoms and here's the Band-Aid, we don't know why you have it, or this is why we think you have it, here's the medication, and then you end up on another medication, right, because you're taking that medication. So that's just how it just starts to roll out. They're not, I heard that from some of the videos I watched, in medical school I think they take 3 hours of nutrition. They're taught how to Band-Aid and manage symptoms, and I've watched it play out in a lot of family circumstances too. It's just like symptom management. We don't want to know the root cause, and we don't think it's fixable, which is not true. And so that's what we do here is we try to educate you guys to take ownership of your health and to advocate for yourselves, because you can heal. And we know that if you give your body the building blocks it needs to heal, that it can heal. And there are interferences to healing, such as metal and chemical toxicity. Food sensitivities is a big one. Immune challenges, like we see so many immune challenges that it just are keeping you from, even if you take the best supplements in the world, if you're not handling the immune challenges your body has, then it can't be in a state of healing and be doing what it needs to do to be at optimum. And so that's what we do, is we try to figure out why you are having the symptoms that you're having, not why your neighbor has them, right? So you can line up, let's do, we can do PCOS as an example. So you can line up 4 people with polycystic ovarian syndrome, and the reason why they have it is completely different. But we've labeled it with this syndrome, and then there's a list of how you treat it, right? So what you see here at the top is symptoms. So I'm going to just say headaches. So if you have headaches, we know that there are nutritional deficiencies and organ dysfunction that can be causing them. What are some of the reasons that people have headaches? Oh gosh. Are you guys coming
That's
to the
the next
stress and
lesson.
hormone lecture?
Yeah.
You guys said stress in unison. That's crazy. What's the other reasons?
Dehydration.
Dehydration is a big one. A lot of people don't realize they're dehydrated until they get a massive headache. And you're like dehydrated from 2 days ago even. Blood pressure, which, kind of stress. What are food sensitivities, chemicals, things like that. Yeah, tight. I clench my jaw, there's all kinds of reasons. So there's all these different reasons. So we need to figure out what are the deficiencies your body has that's causing you to have a headache, and what is the organ dysfunction that is linked to that is causing your symptom, right? And so what happens when your nutritional deficiencies grow? So if you have, say, a vitamin D deficiency and that continues to grow, what happens to the organs that depend on vitamin D?
Struggle.
They continue to decline, right? And so this triangle gets bigger and bigger, so then your symptom gets even more significant, right? A symptom is really just a red flag of something that's been going on for a long time. Or it's just an alert of something else that's going on. So our job here is to put a stop on this triangle and figure out what nutritional deficiencies your body needs as a priority so that your organ dysfunction can shrink and so that your symptoms go away, right? And so that is how, that is what we focus on. And the way that we do that is through nutrition response testing, which I know is weird because I came in as a patient, right? So if you're not familiar with muscle testing, it's weird when you first come in and you don't know how you're going to explain it to your friends and family, right? And so that's why we're here, and it's much easier for us to explain it to you. But nutrition response testing is looking for the root cause and to deal with the body in a system of layers to address the priority organ. So I'll explain some things about the human body that make muscle testing work, and then I'll do a demo with someone. So there's a couple things to understand about the body. Our bodies are very electrical. Did you guys know that, right? So if you can get static electricity, and we forget sometimes that we are very electrical, and that's why it's okay to compare us to cars, right? So we need electricity, and that's what keeps us alive is the electricity that's beating our heart every second. So we have a nervous system that runs through our spine and is attached to every organ, like I call them wires. And I have a little stick, which I don't know where it went, but it shows you how the electricity travels through your body, and then that's also how I'm able to muscle test a baby while a mom's holding the baby, because I'm using the electricity is traveling through. So it's really fascinating. So there's that feature. The other feature of the body is that we don't have to actually physically touch the organ to stimulate distress in that organ. So just like if you put for an EKG, they put the nodes over the heart. They're not actually physically touching the heart, but they can read the electrical energy of what's going on, right? And so just like that, if I press on the dermatome for lung, it adds enough stress to that area that the body is intelligent enough to go and protect that organ and send the energy there. So then if I'm pressing on your arm, it's kind of like hypothermia. What happens if you fall on ice? Like, what goes first on your body?
Extremities.
Your extremities. The body is so smart, and it sends all the heat, all the blood, everything to your internal organs if your body temperature keeps dropping and dropping. And so that's what the body does. If I'm pressing on your arm, I'm not causing any stress to any organs, but I then go press on something that does have some kind of dysfunction. The body is so smart, it will not send any energy to the arm, and that's when we get the unlock. So it's going to protect that organ. Can I demonstrate on you, Nikki? The other factor about life in general is that real food and herbs have wavelengths that coming out of them. And so if you don't know anything, and which I didn't before this job, and what that everything does have a wavelength, you think it's crazy, but like there's radiation coming out of our phones, and the sun is the biggest example I can give you that people can relate to. You can feel the waves coming through the window, and you can feel the warmth on your skin, but you don't see the sun rays, and obviously the sun is super powerful. But everything has its own wavelength, and you kind of experience this with people too. You know, the people that are just like down and, you know, just not, they like suck the life out of you. Like literally that does happen, and you find yourself like wanting to get further and further away. But the people that have good energy, literally emitting from their bodies, then you want to be close to them, which is really fascinating. But so all food in life has its own wavelength, so your body can respond through the glass vial to whether or not that's something that is helpful or that it needs. And so, like I was explaining earlier, so Nikki's not under any stress right now. Right. And so if I press on her arm, she's able to match my pressure. And but if I did, she did say have lung distress, and I press on her lung, then her arm's gonna give out, like we talked about. And so all of you are patients, so you've all experienced it. You're like, I don't get what's happening, but I feel that unlocking and locking. And if this is exactly what her body needed, then it has what it needs. So then when I press on the lung, it's not. Jeez.
I didn't need it.
Yeah, she does not need that. If it was what she needed, her arm would then be locked again because it's not focusing on the deficiency that it has. Okay, so that's a basic explanation. You can have a seat of how that works. But we are specifically designing a nutrition system for your body and figuring out. It is so fun for me. Like, there's this supplement we put all adrenal patients on. I put it on, and their arm like completely falls over. And I'm like, wow, okay, you hated that. So it's really cool. Even though in our training we know this is good for this and this is good for this, but then your body could absolutely hate it or not need that specific thing. You know, if I put inulin on your body, food for a bacteria, your arm might be like zing. You know, when I'm on intestines. But if I put the probiotics on there, it's not ready for it yet, so your arm falls out. So it's really cool. You don't even have to guess, like, are even the common things like probiotics, is your body ready for that yet? It might not be, even though probiotics are a good thing. Does that make sense? So all good things are not good for all people, and so that's why we're able to design it specifically to what your body's needs are. We call it a tailor-made suit or a black dress of nutrition and what your body's needs are. And we are trying to rebuild your health from the ground up. And so we are a pop a pill for a problem country, and we want to be better tomorrow. And so you do have to be patient. Like, you're rebuilding cells, you're rebuilding hormone systems in your body, rebuilding tissues. And so you do want to give your body time to actually heal. You didn't get to the state that you're in overnight, right? Nobody gets to feeling like they are when they walk in the door in one night. So you have to give your body longer than that too. And we are using whole food nutrition, which is the best in my opinion, but you have to give your body time to use those building blocks to lay a new foundation. We got to put the fire out first, sweep out the ashes, put a new foundation down, put walls up, put a roof on. So you have to give your body time to do that, because we're trying to restore your overall health, not just the symptoms that you walk in the door with. Okay. And then the safe and natural part is really awesome. I have a 3-month-old patient and I have a 93-year-old patient. Like, it's safe for both ends of the spectrum, and I have patients who are on medications and then, you know, people who are not, obviously. But we can work with anyone with where they're at, you know, people who are going through unhealthy cell treatment in the body. We can support them in just giving their body what it needs too while they're doing something else. So we kind of can meet every person where they're at, and that's why it's such an amazing tool also. And tonight, since you all are patients, there will not be health checks after. Did anyone bring a friend? Well, you're all patients, so it doesn't count. I was going to give coupons, but if you do bring a friend to lectures, we do give you a $5 coupon, and then your friend can get 25% off their initial exam as well. So, thank you, and thanks for coming.